Hello and welcome to my series of conversations with men and women whose ideas, vision and philosophy define our contemporary world. My guest today is a quintessential embodiment of the artistic sensibility. She has helped India understand itself and present its heritage and culture to the world. Her sensibility manifests itself in a myriad ways as a dancer, an activist, a writer, an environmentalist, a humanist, and so I could go on. A remarkable woman whose work on stage has spanned more than 80 years. I'm delighted to welcome Mrinalini Sarabhai. And I have to say, Mrinalini, that when I was sort of doing this introduction, and what I did was a second take, the first time you just made me very nervous. You have been on stage and performing for 8 decades, and I'm sorry to sort of by implication suggest your age.
That's very wrong of you, I must say.
I really apologize. But tell me, for this sense of timelessness that sort of is encompassed by such a deep, ingrained artistic sensibility, when people talk about you, they say there's no dividing line between Mrinalini's sort of being an artist and her everyday life. What is this artistic sensibility?
No, I think it's exactly how you express yourself. If you're a writer, you express through writing, you express through the television. So I think for me, everything I need to express, I do it in the way that I like to. Now, for instance, dance, of course, is my main, and movement, I think I've always liked to express through movement, which is through classical dance and also creative work. But I also write a lot and read a lot. My favorite thing is to buy books and read and enjoy it so much. I love poetry. So there's so many landscapes of life. And in each landscape one finds something different to inspire. You know, and I suddenly am talking about Bharatanatyam, and I remember my childhood and Wordsworth, or I'm talking about reincarnation, and I remember somebody's poem, which is completely British, because we had an upbringing that encompassed many religions, and to me everything had a kind of inspiration.
Mm-hmm. So you have this underlying artistic sensibility, but it's also driven enormously by passion, a feeling for causes. It goes far beyond merely self-expression or expressing your inner processes and communicating to that world. You're also using art in a very sort of concrete social way, a manner, to initiate, catalyze change about things that you feel strongly about.
Yes, because I think, people think dance should only be beauty and love and so on, and of course mainly in Bharatanatyam it's Shringar and love for God. But love for God means love for the human being, and when you look around us, we live in a world so full of violence, so full of ugliness in some ways, and whereas you can pick a flower and see the beauty of a flower, at the same time you see a poor child who has nothing to eat just next to that flower. And this is the contrast I try to bring out in my work, because one must see both sides of the mirror of the world. And Abhinaya Darpanam is our textbook, which says it is a mirror of life. And if you want to show the proper mirror, you don't show only beauty. You show also the suffering of humanity, the cruelty that's happening so much in our world. And I look around today and I can't sit in a room and say, oh, all is well, the world is at peace. It's not.
But in a sense, you're not just showing it, you're also seeking and working so hard to change it.
Of course, and that is the duty of an artist, because as they say, art should mirror life, and at the same time people must recognize in that and say, what can I do to help it? And I think that is very, very important today, especially. I think artists have a greater responsibility today than in the old days, where the world was much smaller, you only knew your town and you lived in a village, but now you have the whole world looking at you. And to me, I'm really passionate about such things. There's no other word for it. I mean, whenever I see something, I want to mirror it first within me and then without.
But tell me, in what ways is art uniquely and specially equipped to catalyze change? You know, you have done a whole range of things. From in your Darpana center, you have set up a center for nonviolence, using arts to cultivate nonviolence. You know, 30 years ago, you were doing, you know, dance, taking it out to the villages and working with folk forms to eliminate dowry. You've really taken art out into the world and said, how can I use it to change people's perspectives and change people's visions? So in what ways is art uniquely equipped to do that?
I think art is more, because art is movement and life is movement. And so when I stretch out my hand, it's already telling you a story. I don't have to say anything to you. The way I stretch out my hand, whether in anger or I say come, it changes from shringar to something else. So every movement, every finger, every kind of posture that you take speaks so vividly to people. And I think that is where art is so, like a painting, for instance. A painting, of course, after it is done, is static. But even then, when you look at a painting, you see Michelangelo or Hussein or anybody, in the very stroke of their brush, there is a movement. And movement may be still on your wall, but it does something to you within. So you can imagine what a living movement does. So even when I did dowry deaths, and I've done many things on women's problems, when you see it in front of your eyes, you forget that there are dancers doing it. It's the reality that really comes to you. And I think that touches the heart much more than my saying, oh, you know, it's not good to have dowry deaths, or a speech that, you know, we must be very careful. Till you see it, you don't realize.
To what degree is your art in some ways circumscribed by ideology? You know, you grew up in a family, your mother was an MP, or you know, sister fought alongside Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. You know, it was a family that believed in causes.
Yes,
but to what degree is it circumscribed by an ideology? You know, you have been victim in recent times of you know, politics of Gujarat. So you can't escape ideology in some ways. How do you reconcile that?
Well, you have to face things that are really happening. Ideology is very good if it's the correct ideology, but you fight the wrong ideology. And if somebody says it's something wrong, I can't keep still. And I have to reply, and I have to, you see, many of us, and my family especially, both sides of my family, have been kind of pace setters, and people who have been in the forefront for at least 2 generations. My daughter is another one now, my sister Lakshmi, as you said, my mother Mrinalini Sarabhai, my sister-in-law. These have all been women with tremendous passion. Passion for peace, passion for justice, passion for people who have not got the opportunities that perhaps we had. So if we don't take responsibility for them, who will? So we have to fight for our sisters, for our brothers in distress, for children. And if I know how to fight through dance, I do. Somebody else may fight with, I mean, I was never one to go into big processions and so on. But in my own way, through my writing and through my dancing and through a little bit of acting, I've tried to show a mirror of what is really sadly happening in the world today, instead of progress, which we ought to have. I mean, how old is the earth? And by now we should have learned to live in peace, surely. But we haven't.
We'll come right back to that in a moment. You're watching a conversation with Mrinalini Sarabhai. We'll be right back after a short break. Don't go away. Welcome back to a continuing conversation with the dancer, choreographer, activist Mrinalini Sarabhai. You were talking about you know, using dance to fight. Certainly in the early years of your work, you know, you said that it's Bharatanatyam that moves you the most and is your sort of your basic tenet as a dancer. But you practiced Moniattam, you went into Kathakali, a whole range of art forms. And then you decided that you wanted to extend their boundaries, and you began to innovate with them. So somewhere there was sort of, you know, the sheer joy, the sheer ecstasy of playing with form and movement
Yes.
beyond the message.
Yes, yes.
So what kind of, what's the nature of the gratification that gives you?
I think sometimes, you know, when you dance, your body speaks to you. Because I remember I used to go to Kumbakonam where my teacher was and live in great discomfort because from my home, which was very comfortable. In fact, my mother used to scold me and say, why do you want to go and live in a village? And some of our villages are not very comfortable. But the passion for dancing and for studying. And sometimes, you know, while I was dancing, and the guru was a great guru, Meenakshi Sundaram Pillai was one of the greatest gurus of Bharatanatyam. And I say to him, I don't like that movement. And you know, once I will tell you something very strange that happened. I was doing a movement, and I said to him, Tata, we used to call him Tata, Tata, I don't like that movement. So afterwards he laughed, and he said, you come here and sit by me. He said, you know, actually that's not Bharatanatyam. I saw a film and took it from a film. But think of the greatness of the man to tell a kid, because I was after all only just a student, but he had the courage to tell me that you're right. And he asked me, how did you know that? Why did you think? I said, something in my body spoke to me, and I didn't like that movement.
So to what degree does, you know, popular culture, that's obviously something that came in from popular culture, as opposed to classical, that has, you know, evolved over centuries and which feels comfortable and natural, and yet you have worked so hard to expand those boundaries. What prompted that?
I think from the classical, which is after all must have been new sometime thousands of years ago, but there's certain things that you feel are right. It's like your behavior, or it's like a word when you write a book and you think that word is not quite correct. What is English literature or Hindi literature? The writers pick up the words, and probably you'll see lots of scratches. I remember seeing Rabindranath Tagore's manuscripts. I used to be very interested, and if you see, so many words are done, sort of underlined and scratched out. That's how his painting began, because he used to scratch out and make little designs over them, and then suddenly it became a painting, today very valuable for all of us. So it's like that. I think it's, oh, you should know you are doing television. It's a feel of something, and the feel of whether a right angle. For instance, if I were the director today, I'd say, please don't take my profile. I don't like it.
I hope the sort of our producers listening.
It's like that. It's an instinct.
But tell me, you said this aspect of you know, scratching out, as Tagore was able to use in a script. But you know, you go out there on stage and you perform. You can't scratch anything out.
Right. Quite right.
And what happens when you just say, oops, I did that wrong?
I quickly hide it. I hide it between some beautiful movement immediately after. But it's very interesting, because I was presiding at an architectural conference, and I said, you know, I do a movement like this, and if you don't like it, I can always push it away. But you build buildings like this, and nothing can do to push them away if I don't like them. Isn't that true?
So it just gets frozen.
Yes, frozen. Whereas the movement, you can always say, Mrinalini, I didn't like that movement. Can't you change it into something else? But with a building, and I'm sorry to say, many buildings disappoint me nowadays.
You've been, you know, you've alluded to this earlier in our conversation about your, you know, your great passion for the environment, and that, you know, sort of despite whatever thousands of years of man being on Earth, we haven't learned to live with our Earth. You have been campaigning on several environment issues.
Yes.
What do you think is causes, you know, it makes us so insensitive to our environment? And I ask this question to someone who has such an acute sensibility and is sensitive to one's environment.
I think it's greed. Greed. Greed for wood, greed for space. It's really a kind of greed, because I'm not blaming the poor woodcutter who probably lives on wood. and goes to the forest, as in the old days where he takes wood and sells it. I'm not talking about that. But when forests are razed, when tigers are killed, when animals are disappearing, what else is it but greed? Greed for what? For money. And does it really, that money, when you've killed a tree, does it really give you satisfaction? You know, the whole Chipko movement, where I think 250 women were killed. Why? Because the Maharaja wanted furniture. I mean, it's beyond my comprehension how you see a beautiful tree and you can think of just cutting it down.
Tell me, do you have faith in human nature? The fundamental goodness of human nature, in a sense, because much of what you're fighting against, you're struggling against, has to do with the sort of the grossest expressions and manifestations of human nature. Sort of gross insensitivity, the violence and the terrible carnage in Gujarat, so much that's happening around us, issues of the environment. We ordinarily associate art as being something pure and clean and wonderful. Do you think that human nature is fundamentally good?
No. I think there are good people and there are people who are not so good, because I find, in the old days we used to say he's not educated and therefore, he doesn't know, and we used to make excuses for humanity, saying that, they're not educated to our level of, ours meaning a certain level of education. But that is not so anymore. I believe in the human being, but I don't think all human beings have a sensibility of what is honesty, what is goodness, what is beauty.
Do you need to be a good human being to be a great artist?
Not necessarily at all. Some great artists are not good human beings, but they're able to supersede that with art, and I think that is, I've heard written books, I've read books about Picasso and so on. I don't think they were gentle human beings. There was a passion in him and a wonderful artist, but if you looked at him as Mr. Picasso next door, he was not quite perhaps the gentleman you would like to, associate with very closely. But then there's but that is forgiven because he's given the world such a marvelous legacy. I don't know whether it is upbringing, but I've known people who have been brought up so well, also not understanding what nature is, what gentleness is. So I can't say that when I talk to the children, I always say I believe in the inherent goodness of man and woman, but I'm not so sure anymore.
We'll come right back to that in a moment. You're watching a conversation with Mrinalini Sarabhai. We'll be right back after a short break. Don't go away. Welcome back to a continuing conversation with the dancer, choreographer, activist et al., Mrinalini Sarabhai. We were talking about the inherent goodness of human beings, and you quoted the example of Picasso. Does that sensibility change between sort of East and West, where perhaps our traditions have been sort of more rooted in the sacred?
I think so, but I think what happens is that we have been rooted in the sacred, but I think the periphery of our rules and regulations have sometimes been very difficult for the new generation, because we were brought up, my generation was brought up with certain kind of, let us say, not rules exactly, but habits. I would say it's really a habit. Like you go to the temple and you go, and we took this for granted. And I went to the temple, I prayed, and it was a regular thing. I didn't think, why do I go to the temple and why do I do this?
But yet in your time, you and your family, you broke many rules and you extended many boundaries.
Yes, I think we did. But I think as we grew up, we began to question things, like question religion, question our parents who were a bit authoritative about things. So we started to question, and my children questioned me even more. I mean, I have children who themselves are thinking people and who have gone on to new paths. And I've often had this argument with my children, and I say that I don't think this should be done, and they say why. And often I find I have no answer. You know, simple things like even a dress or going dancing. You know, in certain times in Gujarat it was wrong to dance, I mean ballroom dancing and so on, people. And the children would say, why shouldn't we dance? Now I would not object, but I would say, you know, you have to live in society, so you have to behave in a little sort of circumspect way. But they'd say, why?
So, you know, when your children say this to you and you respond, what did you come up against when you moved into the first family of Gujarat and the Sarabhais with your own sort of tradition of dancing and the more public sphere?
It was difficult in the beginning because everything was different from what my family. I belong to a fairly westernized family, so, and though Vikram's family were westernized in a certain sense, there were certain peripheries of behavior.
So what was the argument, the logic that you used to persuade them for you to do you know, what you did and for you to be who you were?
They were quite in agreement. Vikram loved dancing and music, and he was in Bangalore, you know, at the Indian Institute of Science. He used to go to all the dance and music. And I think when he saw me dancing, he really was attracted, because he felt that I was very sincere in whatever I did. And he was one of those people who also looked at the integrity of a person. And they loved my dancing. So they were that way a very open family. But I found around the Gujarati society, they said, you know, Vikram's married a dancing girl from the south. And so that I had to break quite a lot. And my father-in-law helped me a great deal, because he would come and sit in my performances to show his approval. And then when I said that dancing is a service to God, and I usually was doing Bharatanatyam, which was all like a prayer, and so then people slowly began. And I always say that my whole autobiography can be in two ways. Can I show it to you?
Yes, please.
The first was, ooh, dancing girl come to Gujarat, and today, Amma Namaskar. That's it, and that's what happened.
Tell me that, you know, so this career of you know, 8 decades on stage, in what ways has technology, has the external world changed the way that, you know, you go on stage and perform? So not just your inner impulses and the evolution of your art, but the external environment has changed so much.
Yes, because I mean now today you have so much more equipment, like what my daughter Malika does with lighting, with video projection, with sound. It's a whole new world, but I think it's all very beautiful because it emphasizes everything so much. And we have a small theater in Ahmedabad, and we experiment a lot with all sorts of projections and video and sound and light and all that we didn't have.
Do you think that somehow that diminishes the core of the dancer in you that communicated through your body and movement and being?
No, I don't think so. I think, no, I think it's very helpful, because the main thing is the dance, you see, and it's around like flowering around it. And I don't think it diminishes at all. I think on contrary, it helps a great deal, because it also clarifies things more to the audience, which we couldn't do in the old days.
So to what degree do you think that art and your work it needs this process of clarification, verbalizing, explanation, critiquing? Are you sometimes frustrated that, you know, you're into this sort of this wonderful ecstatic process of communication, and then someone wants to talk about it?
No, I'm not. I think I like that, because I like challenges, and I like it when someone asks me, because in the beginning when I did new things, people would come and ask me, why did you do that? That's not a subject for dance. And I'd say, why not? And as I said, repeat again, they always say dance is a mirror. All right, mirror doesn't have only beautiful images, it has all kinds. So when people question me or argue, I always in a way enjoy it because it's a challenge. And I like, I like challenges. And when they say, oh, why did you use this and why did you use that? I say, well, that's what I feel. It's my dancing. And whatever it is, you go around the circle, but it comes back to you. It's my presentation.
You know, earlier on, in the conversation, you spoke about reincarnation. Do you believe in reincarnation?
Oh, yes, fully, fully. Because I know that I myself knew I was a dancer when I was 3 years old. And there was no dancing in my family at all. Nobody was either interested in dancing or even music. I mean, you know, it wasn't that a lot of South Indian families, most of them are musical, but my family was not. They were into politics, and my father believed in a very westernized situation. We ate at table, and we were very British in that sense of the word. So, really speaking, I believe in it.
Tell me, this belief in reincarnation obviously changes your perspective of time. You know, it's not just this lifetime, there's continuity, there was a previous lifetime, there is this one, and there will be the next one. What does that do to you?
I think it makes you a kind of a better person. I think you feel that, look, everything I do is going to have some. Look at your daily living. As you speak today, the result will be tomorrow when audiences see you. It's like that. It's like today, if I'm a better person, tomorrow also I hope to be even better. And I think it's a way of living. It's just stretching out life. We all, when we grow up, you want to be a dancer, you want to be a something else, and you sort of formulate your training for that. Or you're frustrated and you can't do that. But you still, within you, wish you could be somebody else or something.
So what's your agenda for your next life?
Do you think I would tell you? Then you wouldn't be able to interview me in my next life if I told you.
Well, I truly hope that I'm around and doing the same thing to be able to have this enormous privilege of talking to you. Thank you very, very much.
Thank
this
you.
has been a great honor and a great blessing.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ma'am, you're absolutely terrific.